The stars had belonged to the Valorian dominion for 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, containing over 40,000 worlds under their rule. They had conquered species that breathed fire and races that lived in the hearts of dying stars. Nothing in the universe surprised them anymore. Senior cartographer Velthran stood on the observation deck of the survey vessel Quiet Assertion and looked down at the small blue planet below. It was the 3rd world orbiting an unremarkable yellow sun at the edge of explored space. His instruments had already completed their scans. The results were ordinary in every way. "Another primitive world?" he said to his assistant, a young officer named Krell. "Water covers 70% of the surface. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. 1 dominant intelligent species." Krell studied the data on his screen. "They call themselves humans. They have existed for approximately 300,000 years but developed technology only in the last few centuries." Velthran made a sound of dismissal. "Barely infants. What is their current level of advancement?" "They have achieved basic spaceflight within their own system. Chemical propulsion only. No faster-than-light capability. They have visited their moon a handful of times, but have not established permanent colonies beyond their own world." "Typical," Velthran said. He had surveyed hundreds of primitive civilizations during his long career. They were all the same. Young species clinging to their birth worlds, unaware of the vast empire that surrounded them. Most would be absorbed into the Dominion peacefully. Others would resist and be crushed. Either way, the outcome was never in doubt. He transmitted his initial report to the Dominion High Council, located 17,000 light-years away on the throne world of Valoria Prime. The response came within hours, carried by quantum communication arrays that made distance meaningless. The Council's message was brief. Classification requested for planet designated Sol 3. Velthran reviewed the standard categories. Category 1 worlds contained species that had achieved galactic travel and could be considered potential threats. Category 3 worlds held civilizations that had spread beyond their home planets. Category 5 worlds possessed nuclear technology but remained confined to single worlds. Earth fell into Category 7, pre-emergence, non-threat. These were worlds populated by species that had not yet proven themselves worthy of attention. They were marked for eventual resource extraction or colonization, depending on the Dominion's needs. He filed his classification and prepared to move on to the next system. But something made him pause. A small detail in the survey data caught his attention. "Krell," he said slowly, "how many distinct environments exist on this planet?" The assistant checked his readings. "Extreme variety, sir. Frozen poles, burning deserts, dense forests, open grasslands, mountain ranges, deep oceans. Temperature ranges from -90 to +50 degrees on their temperature scale." "And the humans? Where do they live?" Krell was quiet for a moment. "Everywhere, sir. They have established settlements in every environment type. Frozen wastelands, tropical islands, high mountains, coastal regions. There is no biome on their planet where humans have not created permanent habitation." Velthran frowned. This was unusual. Most species preferred specific environments that matched their biological needs. They clustered in comfortable zones and avoided extremes. The Valorians themselves required carefully controlled atmospheric conditions and could not survive outside a narrow temperature range without technological assistance. "What is their natural habitat?" he asked. "Where did they evolve?" "Grasslands, primarily. Open plains in the temperate regions of their largest continent." "Then why have they spread to environments so different from their origin?" Krell had no answer. Velthran studied the planet more closely. His scanners detected massive cities covering the landscape, connected by networks of roads and communication systems. The humans had built structures on every continent, including the frozen southern pole. They had created vessels to cross their deep oceans and aircraft to traverse their skies. They had sent machines to explore every planet in their system, all of this with chemical rockets and primitive electronics. He also detected something else: weapons. The humans possessed weapons of terrible power. Nuclear devices capable of destroying entire cities, chemical agents that could poison the air, biological compounds designed to spread disease. They had used these weapons on each other within living memory. "Curious," Velthran murmured. "They build weapons capable of destroying their own civilization, then continue to exist alongside them. Perhaps they lack the wisdom to understand the danger," Krell suggested. Perhaps. But Velthran was not convinced. No species survived the development of such weapons by accident. The humans had created the means to end their own existence and had chosen not to use them. This required a level of restraint and judgment that seemed inconsistent with their primitive status. He made a decision that would later prove to be one of the most important in Dominion history. "Deploy observation drones," he ordered. "I want continuous monitoring of this species, visual and audio surveillance of their major population centers." Krell looked surprised. "Sir? For a Category 7 world? That level of resources is usually reserved for potential threats." "Consider it professional curiosity," Velthran said. "There is something different about these creatures. I want to understand what it is before we file our final report." The drones descended through Earth's atmosphere, invisible to human technology. They spread across the planet like silent ghosts, watching and recording everything. Velthran expected to find a simple species awaiting their destiny. He expected to document primitives who would soon bow before Dominion superiority. Instead, over the following weeks, the drones captured footage that would be transmitted to every corner of the Empire. They recorded humans running distances that should have killed them. They watched humans survive injuries that would be fatal to any Valorian. They observed humans fighting, building, creating, destroying, and adapting to challenges that seemed impossible. And slowly, the senior cartographer began to suspect that his initial classification had been a terrible mistake. The small blue world was not what it appeared to be. Earth was something else entirely. Commander Cythera of Dominion Intelligence had spent her entire career studying alien civilizations. She had analyzed the rise and fall of empires across the galaxy. She had predicted invasions, rebellions, and extinctions with remarkable accuracy. Her judgment was trusted by the High Council itself. When Velthran's observation reports began arriving from the distant Sol system, she read them with growing unease. The first files contained standard survey data, population numbers, technology levels, resource distributions, nothing remarkable. But the attached drone footage was different. It showed things that should not have been possible. She watched a human run through a frozen landscape where the temperature had dropped below the survival threshold of most known species. The creature wore simple insulated clothing and continued moving for hours. Its body should have failed. Its blood should have frozen. Instead, it reached its destination and celebrated with others of its kind. She watched humans climb the tallest mountain on their world, a peak where the air contained so little oxygen that breathing became nearly impossible. They carried supplies on their backs and pushed forward through winds that would have torn a Valorian apart. Several died on the way. The others kept climbing. She watched humans dive into the crushing depths of their oceans, descending to places where the pressure would destroy Dominion submarines. They explored the darkness at the bottom of their world and returned to the surface alive. "What are these creatures?" she whispered to herself. She began compiling a report for the High Council. The more data she gathered, the more disturbed she became. Earth was not a garden world. It was a death trap. The planet's gravity was heavy by galactic standards, strong enough to make movement exhausting for most species. The atmosphere contained high levels of oxygen, a corrosive gas that reacted violently with organic compounds. Radiation from the sun bombarded the surface constantly. The magnetic field fluctuated unpredictably. Tectonic plates shifted beneath the ground, causing earthquakes that destroyed cities. Weather systems produced storms of incredible violence, and the other life forms on Earth were equally hostile. The planet teemed with predators, parasites, and diseases. Microscopic organisms invaded the bodies of larger creatures and consumed them from within. Venomous animals injected poisons that could kill in minutes. Larger predators hunted with teeth and claws designed for killing. Any Valorian visiting Earth without full environmental protection would be dead within days, possibly hours. Yet humans thrived there. They had not merely survived on this hostile world, they had conquered it. Cythera studied their biology with increasing amazement. Humans could regulate their internal temperature across an enormous range. They could survive the loss of limbs, organs, and massive amounts of blood. Their wounds healed naturally over time. Their immune systems fought off infections that would overwhelm Valorian medicine. When food was scarce, their bodies consumed their own fat reserves and continued functioning. When water was unavailable, they could survive for days on metabolic reserves alone. They required sleep, but could force themselves to remain awake for extended periods when necessary. Most remarkably, they could run, not fast compared to many predators, but far. Their ancestors had hunted by chasing prey until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. No other known species used this strategy because no other species possessed the endurance to employ it. The Dominion had conquered thousands of worlds. They had never encountered anything like humans. Cythera prepared her report and transmitted it to the High Council with a recommendation for elevated monitoring status. She argued that Earth should be reclassified as a potential threat and that any contact should be approached with extreme caution. The Council's response arrived the next day. "Your concerns are noted," the message read. "However, the species in question has not achieved faster-than-light travel. They cannot leave their own system. They pose no threat to the Dominion. Classification remains Category 7. Proceed with standard observation." Cythera read the message twice. Then she began composing a second report. She had saved the most disturbing data for last, the footage she had not wanted to believe. Human warfare. The drones had accessed historical archives on Earth. They had found records of conflicts stretching back thousands of years. Wars fought with stones, and spears had evolved into wars fought with rifles and artillery. Then came the weapons that ended cities in single flashes of light. The humans had developed nuclear technology and immediately used it against each other. Twice. Then they had built thousands more such weapons and pointed them at their own population centers. For decades, they had lived under the threat of complete self-destruction, and they had simply continued with their lives. But the nuclear weapons were not what frightened Cythera most. It was the other footage, the older footage. She watched humans charge into certain death during their world wars. She watched them fight in trenches filled with poison gas, returning to battle day after day even as their comrades died around them. She watched them crash aircraft into enemy vessels, sacrificing themselves to destroy their opponents. She watched them resist occupation for years, fighting from shadows with improvised weapons, refusing to surrender even when their situations were hopeless. When humans were threatened, they did not flee. They did not freeze. They did not submit. They fought, with everything they had, until they won or until they died. Cythera had seen many species resist Dominion expansion. She had seen brave warriors and desperate defenders, but she had never seen a species that combined such physical resilience with such psychological determination. She transmitted her second report with a single added line. "If we threaten these creatures, They will not stop fighting until one of our species is extinct. I recommend we ensure it is not ours." The High Council did not respond. 3 standard weeks later, Sithara received news that the Council had authorized a diplomatic mission to Earth. A Dominion vessel would descend to the planet's surface and deliver standard annexation terms to the human governments. She requested permission to accompany the mission. Her request was denied. She could only watch from 17,000 light-years away as the Dominion made the greatest mistake in its 10,000-year history. The Dominion vessel, Herald of Proper Order, descended through Earth's atmosphere on a bright morning in early spring. It made no attempt to hide itself. The ship was 3 kilometers long and shaped like a silver blade, designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. Ambassador Keth Vorax stood on the command deck and watched the planet rise to meet him. He had performed this ritual many times before. First contact with primitive species was always the same. The aliens would panic. They would worship. They would submit. The Dominion's technological superiority was so vast that resistance was unthinkable. The ship settled into a hovering position above one of Earth's largest cities. Human aircraft scattered before it like frightened insects. Keth Vorax smiled. The creatures were already afraid. "Begin transmission," he ordered. "Standard annexation greeting." The ship's communication arrays broadcast in every frequency the humans used. The message was simple. "You are now subjects of the Valorian Dominion. Prepare to receive our representatives. Resistance will result in termination." Keth Vorax expected chaos. He expected military forces to surround the landing zone in confused disorder. He expected religious leaders to declare the arrival of gods or demons. He expected governments to collapse as their citizens realized how small and helpless they truly were. What he got was something completely different. Within 2 hours, the area beneath the ship had been evacuated. Human military forces established a perimeter with remarkable efficiency. They did not fire. They did not flee. They simply watched and waited. Within 6 hours, human governments around the world had established communication with each other. Representatives from every major nation were coordinating their response. There was no panic. There was no disorder. Within 12 hours, the humans sent their reply. Keth Vorax read the message with confusion. It was not a surrender. It was not a plea for mercy. It was a series of questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? Why are you here? What do you want? They are negotiating, his tactical officer observed, as if they have leverage. They are confused, Keth Vorax decided. They do not understand their situation. Transmit the terms again. Make clear the consequences of refusal. The second message was more detailed. It explained that Earth would become a tributary world of the Dominion. Human governments would be dissolved. Human resources would be harvested. Human populations would be relocated as needed to serve Dominion interests. Cooperation would be rewarded. Resistance would be punished with extinction. The human response came from every government simultaneously, as if they were speaking with one voice. "We decline your offer. Please leave our planet." Keth Vorax stared at the message for a long moment. In 300 years of diplomatic service, no species had ever simply refused. They bargained, they begged, they threatened, but they did not simply say no. "Perhaps they do not believe we are serious," his officer suggested. "A demonstration may be required." Keth Vorax agreed. He ordered a targeting solution for a small, uninhabited island in the ocean below. A single beam from the ship's weapons array would vaporize it completely, showing the humans the price of defiance. Before he could give the order, another human transmission arrived. This one was different. It contained no words, only images and video files. Hundreds of them. Keth Vorax watched the files play across his screen. He saw mushroom clouds rising over human cities. He saw trenches filled with corpses. He saw bombed ruins and burning forests. He saw weapons that spread disease and chemicals that melted flesh. He saw the face of human warfare in all its terrible glory. The final file was a simple text message. We did this to ourselves. Over a disagreement about borders. Imagine what we will do to you if you threaten our entire species. The tactical officer had gone pale. Ambassador, perhaps we should— Be quiet, Kethavorax snapped. But his hands were trembling. He had underestimated these creatures. They were not afraid because they had nothing to fear. They had already survived horrors that would have broken any Dominion species. The threat of destruction meant nothing to them. They had lived under that threat for generations. He composed a new message, his confidence shaken, but not destroyed. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your technology is primitive. Your threats are meaningless. Submit or face consequences beyond your comprehension. The human response came from a building called the United Nations, where representatives of all Earth's nations had gathered. We have analyzed your ship's energy signatures. Your shields are impressive. Your weapons are advanced. But you are one vessel, and we are 8 billion people on a planet we have defended for 300,000 years. We do not know if we can defeat you, but we know we will make you bleed for every inch of our world, and we know you will never hold it. We will fight you in our cities and our forests. We will fight you in our mountains and our deserts. We will fight you with weapons you understand and weapons you cannot imagine. We will teach our children to fight you and their children after them. Your empire may be eternal, but so is human stubbornness. Leave now, and we can discuss peace. Stay, and we will discuss nothing but war. Kethavorax read the message 3 times. Then he contacted the High Council and recommended immediate orbital bombardment of Earth's major population centers. The humans needed to be taught their place. They needed to learn that resistance was futile. The High Council, confident in Dominion's superiority, authorized a limited military action. A squadron of fighters would descend to destroy a human military installation. This would demonstrate Dominion power without wasting resources on a full bombardment. Kethavorax watched the fighters launch from his ship's bays. 40 of the most advanced atmospheric combat vehicles in the galaxy, each capable of leveling a city. He expected the engagement to last minutes. He was correct about the duration. He was wrong about the outcome. The 40 Dominion fighters screamed through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. Their pilots were veterans of 100 campaigns across the galaxy. They had never known defeat. Their aircraft were equipped with energy shields that could deflect asteroid impacts and weapons that could cut through starship armor. Their target was a human military base in the mountains. Intelligence estimated it contained several thousand soldiers and a collection of primitive vehicles. The plan was simple: destroy the base, broadcast the footage to human governments, and accept their surrender. The first human missiles launched when the fighters were still 50 kilometers from their target. The Dominion pilots detected them immediately. Chemical propulsion systems, simple guidance computers, explosive warheads that posed no threat to Valorian shields. The countermeasures activated automatically, destroying the missiles with contemptuous ease. More missiles followed, dozens of them, then hundreds. The pilots began to feel the first hints of concern. Their countermeasure systems were designed for energy weapons and smart projectiles. They were not designed for this. The humans were simply throwing metal and explosives into the sky in massive quantities, overwhelming defensive systems through pure volume. The first fighter fell when its shields failed under continuous bombardment. The pilot ejected but was struck by shrapnel before his escape pod could activate. He died confused, unable to understand how primitive weapons had defeated him. The second fighter tried to climb above the missile range. Human aircraft were waiting for it. Old designs, propeller-driven and jet-powered, carrying missiles and guns. They should have been no threat at all. But there were so many of them. They attacked from every direction, sacrificing themselves to bring down a single enemy. On the ground, human soldiers watched the battle through binoculars and targeting systems. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, not specifically for alien invasion, but for war against superior enemies. Their doctrine was simple: hit hard, keep hitting, never stop hitting. Mobile launchers fired rockets from concealed positions. Artillery batteries sent shells screaming into the sky. Soldiers with shoulder-mounted missiles waited for aircraft to pass overhead. When the Dominion fighters descended to attack ground positions, they found not helpless targets, but coordinated defensive networks that covered every approach with overlapping fields of fire. The Herald of Proper Order attempted to provide support from orbit. HFY ordered targeting solutions for human military installations across the globe. But the humans had prepared for this too. Submarines that had been tracking the alien vessel since its arrival launched their payloads. Cruise missiles climbed from the ocean surface, their guidance systems locked on the massive ship above. They were not powerful enough to destroy the Herald, but they forced it to raise shields, diverting power from offensive weapons, and they kept coming. Wave after wave, the humans had spent decades building these weapons to fight each other. Now they turned them against a common enemy with fierce efficiency. On the ground near the targeted base, Dominion troops deployed from transport craft to establish forward positions. They were elite soldiers, equipped with armor that could stop human bullets and weapons that could vaporize human vehicles. They expected the defending forces to flee or surrender. Instead, the humans attacked. They came from buildings and trenches, from forests and rooftops. They fired weapons that bounced harmlessly off Valorian armor. They threw grenades that barely scratched the alien metal. They died by the dozens as energy beams cut through their ranks. But they did not stop. A human soldier tackled a Dominion trooper, clinging to the alien's weapon arm while her companions found weak points in his armor. A tank charged directly at an alien position, its crew knowing they would not survive, buying time for infantry to flank. Snipers targeted sensor arrays and communication equipment, blinding the invaders. The Dominion troops had never experienced anything like this. Every species they had conquered showed fear. Every enemy they had faced understood when they were beaten. These creatures did not seem to understand anything except attack. A Valorian sergeant watched a wounded human drag himself across the ground toward an alien position, a grenade clutched in his remaining hand. The sergeant shot him. The human kept crawling. He shot him again. The human pulled the pin with his teeth and threw the grenade with his last breath. It did not kill the sergeant, but it damaged his communication array. He was isolated from his squad for nearly 3 minutes. In those 3 minutes, humans killed 4 of his soldiers. The battle lasted 19 hours. When it ended, the Dominion had achieved their objective. The human base was destroyed. The surrounding area was cratered and burning. But of the 40 fighters deployed, only 6 returned to the Herald. Dominion ground forces suffered their first combat deaths in 3 centuries. Human casualties were in the thousands, but their forces had retreated in good order, carrying their wounded and preparing for the next engagement. HFY looked at the after-action reports and felt something he had never experienced in his long career: fear. The humans had lost the battle. They had lost badly by any objective measurement. But they had fought as if victory and defeat were meaningless concepts, as if the only thing that mattered was making their enemy pay for every meter of ground. And they were already regrouping, already planning, already building more missiles and training more soldiers. The Herald of Proper Order withdrew to high orbit, trailing debris from dozens of impacts. HFY transmitted his report to the High Council. "Recommend immediate withdrawal from Sol system," he wrote. "These creatures cannot be conquered by conventional means. They do not surrender. They do not negotiate. They fight until they win or until they die. Subduing this planet will require resources the Dominion cannot afford to spend." For the first time in living memory, the High Council called an emergency session to discuss a Category 7 world. Something had changed. The galaxy had become a more dangerous place. The High Council chamber had not seen such chaos in 1,000 years. Representatives from every sector of the Dominion crowded the ancient hall, their voices rising in argument and accusation. At the center of the room, a holographic display showed the small blue planet that had caused so much trouble. Supreme Chancellor Veth Oran called for silence. The noise continued for several moments before finally dying away. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion. "The Warmind has completed its analysis," he announced. "You will all see the projections now." The holographic display changed. Numbers and probability calculations filled the chamber. The assembled representatives fell silent as they read the data. Full planetary conquest of Earth would require a fleet of 12,000 vessels, ground forces numbering in the tens of millions. Expected Dominion casualties, 40% of deployed forces in the first year alone. But the numbers grew worse from there. Planetary occupation would face continuous resistance. Human populations would never accept Dominion rule. Insurgencies would continue for generations. The Warmind projected that pacifying Earth completely would require resources equivalent to conquering 50 normal worlds. And there was another factor. The humans were learning. Dominion intelligence had intercepted communications from Earth's scientific institutions. Within weeks of first contact, human engineers had begun analyzing fragments recovered from downed fighters. They were reverse engineering Valorian alloys. They were developing theories about faster-than-light travel. They were adapting. The Warmind projected that within 50 years, humans would achieve interstellar capability. Within a century, they would be a major spacefaring civilization. Within 2 centuries, they would rival the Dominion itself. If they were attacked now, they would remember. They would rebuild. They would come looking for revenge. Commander Cythera had been summoned from her post to address the council. She stood before the assembled representatives and delivered her assessment without emotion. "I have studied thousands of species," she said. "I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have never seen anything like humanity. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the fastest or the most intelligent, but they possess something we do not understand. They refuse to accept defeat. They adapt to any challenge. They learn from their enemies and become stronger. And they never, ever forget." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We made a mistake," she continued. "We looked at their small planet and their primitive technology, and we assumed they were weak. We did not understand that Earth is not a cradle. It is a forge. Every disaster, every predator, every war has made them harder. They have been fighting for survival since their species first appeared. They have been preparing for us without knowing we existed." Senior cartographer Velthron spoke next. His voice was quieter than it had been when he first surveyed the Sol system. He had watched the battle footage. He had seen humans die by the hundreds and keep fighting. He had seen wounded soldiers refuse evacuation so they could fire one more shot at the enemy. "I made the initial classification," he admitted. "Category 7. Non-threat. I was wrong. These creatures are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered, not because of their weapons, not because of their technology, because of what they are. They are survivors. They are fighters. They are endlessly, impossibly stubborn." The debate continued for 3 standard days. Hawks demanded that Earth be destroyed from orbit before humans could develop interstellar travel. Moderates argued for containment and observation. A small faction suggested alliance, proposing that humans could be valuable partners rather than subjects. In the end, Supreme Chancellor Veth Oran made the final decision. "We have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, he said. "We have conquered every enemy we have faced. We believed we were the supreme power in the universe. Perhaps we still are. But these humans have shown us something we had forgotten. The universe is vast and full of surprises. We do not know everything. We cannot predict everything. And sometimes the small and weak can become the great and terrible. He entered the command into the Dominion archives personally. Earth, classification category 0, existential threat level. Do not engage, do not approach, monitor only. All Dominion vessels are forbidden from entering the Sol system without express Council authorization. It was the first time in Dominion history that a pre-spaceflight species had received such a designation. The Herald of Proper Order withdrew from Earth orbit and jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving the Sol system behind. As it departed, it transmitted a final message to Earth's governments. We acknowledge your strength. We will not return, but we will remember you. The human response came from billions of voices across the planet. It was broadcast on every frequency, sent from every transmitter, spoken in every language. We are counting on it. The Dominion established a monitoring station at the edge of the Sol system, far enough to avoid detection, close enough to observe. For decades, they watched humans rebuild and advance. They watched them establish permanent colonies on their moon and neighboring planets. They watched them develop new technologies with frightening speed. And then, 50 years after first contact, they watched a human vessel enter faster-than-light travel for the first time. The ship did not wander randomly through the galaxy, exploring nearby stars like most newly spacefaring species. It set a course directly for Valorian space. The humans had studied everything they could learn from the brief conflict. They had analyzed captured technology. They had decoded Dominion transmissions. They knew where the Empire was located. And they were coming, not to invade, not to conquer. The message they broadcast as they traveled was simple. We are humanity. We come in peace. But we remember what you tried to do. Now let us show you who we really are. The monitoring station transmitted an urgent alert to the High Council. The small blue world was no longer small. The fragile species was no longer fragile. Earth had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the Great Council chamber on Valoria Prime, Supreme Chancellor Veth Oren read the alert and smiled despite himself. He had been terrified of this moment for 50 years, but now that it had arrived, he felt something unexpected. Curiosity. These strange, stubborn, impossible creatures had proven themselves. They had earned their place among the stars. What would they do with it? What would they become? He suspected the universe was about to find out. The Great Hall of the Galaxy Council was silent. Thousands of alien representatives sat in their seats, their many eyes watching the human woman who stood alone in the center of the chamber. Ambassador Elena Vasquez looked small against the massive crystal walls of Thessera Prime, but her voice did not shake. "We are asking for help," she said. "Not charity, not pity, help." The translation devices carried her words to every corner of the hall. Beings with scales and feathers and skin like stone listened. Some leaned forward with interest. Most did not move at all. Elena touched the holographic display beside her. A map of the galaxy appeared in the air. A small yellow dot marked Sul, humanity's home star. And moving toward it, a red circle pulsed like an angry heartbeat. "The object we call the Wanderer is a rogue neutron star," Elena continued. "It has no fixed orbit. It moves through space on its own path, and that path will take it directly through our solar system in 112 years. She paused to let the words sink in. "When it passes, its gravity will tear our planets apart. Earth will be destroyed. Mars will be destroyed. Every human colony in the Sol system will cease to exist. 8 billion people will die." Whispers moved through the hall like wind through tall grass. Elena raised her hand. "We know that the elder races have the technology to move stars. We have seen the records. The Valeth saved the Pentari homeworld 3,000 years ago. The Sorn Collective redirected a black hole to protect the Miran cluster. We are not asking for something impossible. We are asking for something you have done before. She lowered her hand and looked directly at High Counselor Zethron. The Valeth leader sat on his elevated throne, his silver skin catching the light. His 4 eyes showed no emotion. We joined this council 300 years ago, Elena said. We followed your laws. We paid our tributes. We sent our ships to fight in your wars. We have been good members of this community. And now we ask you, in our darkest hour, to stand with us. She stopped speaking. The hall remained quiet for a long moment. Then Zethran raised one long-fingered hand. The council will deliberate, he said. His voice was cold and smooth like ice. You will have our answer in time. Elena nodded. She had done everything she could. Now she could only wait. The waiting lasted 4 months. During those months, Elena watched the council members argue and debate. She met with representatives in private rooms, trying to win their support. Some were kind. They said they understood humanity's fear. But understanding and action were different things. The Valeth worried about the cost. Moving a neutron star would require enormous resources. The Sorn Collective questioned whether humans were worth saving. They pointed to humanity's history of war and violence. The architect minds, the ancient machine intelligences who rarely spoke, said nothing at all. On the day of the vote, Elena stood once again in the Great Hall. Her heart beat fast in her chest. Around her, the representatives prepared to decide the fate of her species. High Counselor Zethron called each delegation to vote. One by one, they gave their answers. The Pentari voted yes. They remembered their own near extinction. They remembered how it felt to beg for help. The Miran voted yes. The Deleth voted yes. 4 more species joined them. But then the no votes began to fall. The Sorn Collective voted no. Humans are too dangerous, their speaker said. Perhaps the universe is correcting a mistake. The Corvash Empire voted no. We do not waste resources on the weak. More no votes followed. Elena counted them in her head. 17 species refused to vote at all, choosing to abstain. They did not want the blood on their hands, but they would not lift a finger to stop it. When the final count came, Elena already knew the result. 23 against, 7 in favor, 17 abstaining. The motion failed. High Counselor Zethron rose from his throne. He looked down at Elena with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. The council has decided, he announced. We will not intervene in the path of the wanderer. The cosmos has its own wisdom, its own balance. Perhaps this is simply meant to be. Elena felt the words hit her like physical blows. Meant to be. 8 billion deaths, and he called it balance. Something changed inside her in that moment. The hope she had carried for months turned to ash. And from that ash, something harder began to grow. She reached up and removed the silver circlet from her head. It was the symbol of council membership, the device that allowed her to speak to all species. She had worn it with pride for 15 years. Now she dropped it on the floor. The sound of metal hitting stone echoed through the silent hall. Then we will save ourselves, Elena said. Her voice was quiet, but every being in that chamber heard her clearly. We will find a way to survive without you, and when we do, when humanity still stands while the wanderer fades into the void, I want you to remember this moment. She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as she could. Remember that you taught us what the galaxy truly thinks of humanity. Remember that you showed us we are alone. Remember that when we asked for help, you told us to die quietly. She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps were the only sound. And remember, she said without looking back, that we will never forget. The doors closed behind her. Within 1 month, every human vessel had left council space. Every embassy was closed. Every trade agreement was canceled. Every communication channel went silent. Humanity retreated to their own corner of the galaxy. The council watched them go with relief. The troublesome species had finally gone away. They would burn in the light of their dying sun, and the galaxy would continue without them. Some council members felt guilty. A few even argued that the decision was wrong. But most believed they had made the logical choice. Why waste resources on a species that would never amount to anything? They told themselves that humans would accept their fate. They would panic and fight among themselves. They would fall into despair. When the Wanderer came, it would find only ruins and corpses. The Council did not understand humanity at all, because while they celebrated their freedom from human problems, something was happening in Sol system. Ships were being built, factories were working day and night, scientists were gathering in secret facilities on distant moons. Humanity was not preparing to die. Humanity was preparing to fight a star. And when they won, the galaxy would learn that they had made a terrible mistake by abandoning their most stubborn children to the dark. The stars themselves would not be enough to break the human spirit. 70 years passed like a fever dream. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation deck of Station Prometheus, watching robots the size of mountains move through space. They carried pieces of metal larger than cities. They were building something that should have been impossible. Behind her, the sun burned bright and steady. It did not know that death was coming for it. It did not know that the tiny creatures living on its planets were fighting to save everything they loved. Yuki knew. She thought about it every single day. "Doctor," said her assistant, a young man named David Chen. "The latest numbers are in. We're still behind schedule." Yuki nodded without turning around. "How far behind?" 18 months, maybe more. She closed her eyes. 18 months they did not have. The Wanderer would not wait for them to finish. Stars did not care about schedules or hope or the dreams of small beings. "Then we work faster," she said. "We sleep less. We push harder." David hesitated. "The workers are already exhausted. We've had 3 accidents this month. People are dying, Doctor." "More people will die if we fail." Yuki finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. Her hair had turned gray years ago. She was only 45 years old, but she looked 60. "Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I know what I'm asking. But tell them to keep working." David nodded and left. Yuki turned back to the window. Outside, the skeleton of the stellar engine slowly took shape. It would be a ring around the sun itself, a machine capable of pushing their star out of the Wanderer's path. The Council said it was impossible. Human engineers said they would do it anyway. They had no other choice. Far away from the sun, on the cold edge of the solar system, Admiral Marcus Cole walked through the corridors of the generation ship Hope's Light. The vessel was one of 50 being built for the Exodus fleet. If Project Prometheus failed, these ships would carry the last humans into the unknown. Marcus hated the Exodus fleet. He hated what it represented. It meant giving up on Earth, on Mars, on everything humanity had built. But he was a soldier. His job was not to hope. His job was to prepare for the worst. "Admiral on deck," someone called as he entered the command center. "As you were," Marcus said. He walked to the main display and studied the fleet's status. "Report." "All 50 ships are at various stages of completion," his second officer said. "We can carry 10 million people when they're finished. Maybe 12 million if we pack them tight." 10 million out of 8 billion. Marcus did the math in his head. If Prometheus failed, less than 1% of humanity would survive. And those survivors would spend generations drifting through empty space, looking for a new home that might not exist. "It's not enough," he said quietly. "It's more than nothing, sir." Marcus nodded. More than nothing. That was the human way. When faced with total destruction, they fought for scraps. They clawed and scratched for every small victory. Even if they could not win, they would not go quietly. "Continue construction," he ordered. "Double shifts. We need these ships ready." On the other side of human space, on a small colony world called New Damascus, a young woman named Sarah Okonkwo was staring at data that did not make sense. Sarah was a physicist. She studied stars and gravity and the strange forces that held the universe together. For the past 5 years, she had been analyzing the Wanderer, trying to understand its path through space, and she had found something wrong. "This can't be right," she muttered to herself. She ran the calculations again. The numbers came out the same. The Wanderer was not moving naturally. A rogue neutron star should follow predictable patterns. Gravity pulled it in certain directions. Other celestial bodies affected its course. Everything in space moved according to rules. But the Wanderer was breaking those rules. It was accelerating in ways that made no sense. Its path curved when it should have been straight, and deep in its energy signature, Sarah found patterns that no natural object should have. Someone was controlling it. She sat back in her chair, her mind racing. The implications were terrifying. The Wanderer was not an accident. It was not bad luck. Something had sent it toward Sol's system on purpose. Something wanted humanity dead. Sarah gathered her data and sent an urgent message to Earth. She did not know if anyone would believe her. She barely believed it herself, but the numbers did not lie. The galaxy's greatest killer was not a random disaster. It was a weapon. When her message reached Earth, it changed everything. The leaders of humanity gathered in an underground bunker to discuss Sarah's findings. They argued for days. Some said she was wrong. Others said it did not matter. They were already doing everything they could. But Elena Vasquez, now old and retired, spoke up from her seat in the corner. "It matters," she said. Her voice was weaker than it had been 70 years ago, but her spirit was just as strong. "Because if something sent this star to kill us, we need to ask why. We need to ask what we did to deserve this, and we need to ask if it will try again." The room fell silent. "We cannot just survive the Wanderer," Elena continued. "We need to understand it. We need to find out who our enemy is. Because if we push this star away and another one comes and another after that, then all our work means nothing." She was right. Everyone knew she was right. New orders went out across human space. Keep building the engine, keep preparing the fleet, but also search. Look through the old records, scan the ancient ruins on dead worlds, find out who had decided that humanity should not exist. The 3 great projects continued side by side. Tanaka worked on the engine, Cole prepared the ships, and Sarah dug deeper into the mystery of the Wanderer. They did not know that the answer was older than the galaxy itself. They did not know that humanity was not the first species to face this test. They did not know that the universe had been cleaning house for billions of years, wiping out any civilization that grew too powerful. But they would learn, and when they did, they would discover that their fight was not just about survival. It was about breaking a cycle that had killed more species than anyone could count. The stars had turned against them, but humanity was about to turn back. 20 years before impact, the stellar engine was 60% complete. Humanity was running out of time, but hope was still alive. Then the Wanderer accelerated. Dr. Tanaka received the news while standing on Station Prometheus. A young scientist ran into her office, his face white with fear. "It's moving faster," he said. "Much faster." Tanaka felt her heart stop. "How much faster?" "We had 20 years. Now we have 7. 7 years. The engine needed at least 12 more years to finish." The math was simple and terrible. They would not make it. Tanaka walked to the window and looked out at the half-built ring around the sun. Thousands of workers were out there right now, welding metal and adjusting machines. They did not know yet. They were still working with hope in their hearts. She would have to tell them. Something pushed it, the young scientist said quietly. Just like Dr. Okonkwo predicted. Something saw what we're building. Something decided to speed up our death. Tanaka nodded. She had read Sarah's reports. She knew the Wanderer was not natural, but knowing and feeling were different things. Now she felt it. Somewhere out in the darkness, something ancient and powerful wanted her species to die. And it was watching. Across human space, panic spread like fire. The news could not be hidden. 7 years. Just 7 years to live. Admiral Cole ordered the Exodus fleet to launch immediately. The ships were only half finished. They could carry 5 million people instead of 10. But waiting meant carrying no one at all. Load them up, Cole ordered. His voice was steady even though his hands were shaking. Families first, children first, anyone who can have more children. We need to save the future, not the past. The loading stations became scenes of chaos and heartbreak. Parents pushed their children onto ships, knowing they would never see them again. Young couples were separated because there was only room for one. Old people stood aside and watched the young board, accepting that their time was over. Cole watched from the command deck of the Defiance. He was 70 years old now. His hair was white. His body was tired. But he would not leave. His job was to guard the fleet until the very end. Set course for the edge of the galaxy, he ordered. Maximum speed. Don't look back. The Exodus fleet departed, 50 ships carrying the last hope of humanity into the unknown. Behind them, 8 billion people remained to face the coming storm. While humanity struggled, strange things began happening across the galaxy. Ancient machines that had been silent for millions of years suddenly woke up. Automated stations on dead worlds started sending signals. The Violith found their sacred burial moons transmitting messages in languages that had been forgotten before their species evolved. High Counselor Zethran stood in his palace, watching reports come in from every corner of council space. Something was stirring, something old, something terrible. "What is happening?" he asked his advisors. No one could answer. Then a human ship appeared in Valith space. It was small and fast, a smuggler's vessel. It carried one passenger and one message. Jack Reyes was a criminal. He had spent his life moving illegal goods between worlds. But when Sarah Okonkwo asked him to deliver her research to the Galaxy Council, he agreed without asking for payment. "Some things are more important than money," he told her. Now he stood in Zethran's throne room, holding a data crystal that would change everything. "Dr. Okonkwo sent me," Jack said. "She found the truth about the Wanderer, and the truth is worse than you think." Zethran took the crystal and loaded it into his display system. What he saw made his silver skin turn pale. Sarah's research showed the complete picture. The Wanderer was not unique. Throughout galactic history, similar events had happened again and again. A neutron star appears from nowhere. It destroys a civilization at the height of its power. Then it disappears. The Valith had old records of species that vanished millions of years ago. The Sorn Collective remembered legends of great empires that fell to fire from the sky. The architect minds had been silent because they knew. They had survived by staying small, by staying hidden, by never growing powerful enough to be noticed. Every civilization that reached a certain level was destroyed. Every single one. The elder races of the Council were not the most advanced species in galactic history. They were simply the ones who had never triggered the cleansing. They had survived by being mediocre. And humanity, in their desperate attempt to save themselves, had triggered the next purge. "The Wanderer is not just aimed at humans," Zethran whispered. He understood now. "It will start with Sul, but it will not stop there." Jack nodded. "Dr. Okonkwo calls them the Harvesters. She doesn't know what they are. Maybe machines, maybe something else. But they've been pruning the galaxy for billions of years, and humanity just woke them up for everyone. The council met in emergency session for the first time in a century. Representatives who had voted to let humanity die now faced a terrible truth. By abandoning the humans, they had doomed themselves. Some species wanted to flee. They argued that the galaxy was big enough to hide in. If they scattered far enough, maybe the harvesters would not find them all. Others wanted to surrender. They talked about sending messages of peace, begging for mercy from whatever controlled the Wanderer. But Zethran stood and silenced them all. 70 years ago, I told humanity that their death was meant to be. I was wrong. I was more wrong than I have ever been in my long life. He looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of 100 species. The humans did not accept their fate. They did not beg. They did not scatter. They started building a machine to move their own sun. They are still fighting even now, even though they know they cannot win. He raised his chin. If we are to die, let us die like humans. Let us die fighting. Let us stand with the species we abandoned and show the harvesters that the galaxy is not a garden to be pruned. The vote was called. This time, there were no abstentions. Ships from 31 species began moving toward Sol system. The Galaxy Council was going to war, and humanity, for the first time in 70 years, would not fight alone. The alien ships began arriving at Sol system on a cold day in February. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched them come through the darkness. Ships of every shape and size. Ships that had once been enemies. Ships that had watched humanity suffer alone. Now they came to fight beside them. I never thought I would see this, Cole said quietly. His second officer shook her head. Neither did any of us, sir. The first vessel to dock with the Defiance was a Valeth cruiser. High Counselor Zethran himself walked through the airlock. His silver skin seemed dull under the human lights. His 4 eyes were heavy with regret. Admiral Cole, he said formally, I come to offer the service of my fleet. Cole was silent for a long moment. This being had voted to let his species die. This being had called their extinction balance. 70 years of anger burned in Cole's chest. But 70 years had also taught him something. Hatred was heavy. It slowed you down when you needed to move fast. And right now, they needed to move very fast indeed. Welcome to Sol System, High Counselor, Cole said. He extended his hand. We have work to do. Zethran looked at the human hand. Among his people, such contact was reserved for close family. But he understood the gesture. He reached out and took Cole's hand. Tell us what you need, Zethran said. The combined fleet gathered in a line between Earth and the outer system. Ships from 31 species plus what remained of the human navy. It was the largest military force in galactic history, and it was facing an impossible enemy. The Wanderer entered the solar system like a god of destruction. It was not large, only 20 kilometers across. But it was dense beyond imagination. Its gravity pulled at everything around it. Asteroids fell toward it like rain falling upward. Space itself seemed to bend as it passed. And it was coming fast. Dr. Tanaka sent a message from Station Prometheus. We need more time, at least 40 hours. If you can slow it down even a little, we might have a chance. Cole looked at the monster approaching his home. 40 hours. They needed to fight a star for 40 hours. All ships, he announced over the fleet-wide channel. Our mission is simple. Delay the Wanderer. Every minute we buy is a minute our engineers need. Use everything you have. Hold nothing back. He paused. I won't lie to you. Most of us will not survive this day. But our deaths will have meaning. Our deaths will buy time for everyone we love. Our deaths will prove that free beings do not surrender to cosmic tyranny. He stood straight on his command deck, a tired old man who refused to bend. "All ships, attack!" The fleet surged forward. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships tried to push against the Wanderer with gravity beams. They fired antimatter weapons into its surface. They dropped themselves into its path, sacrificing their mass to change its course by tiny fractions. Nothing worked the way they hoped, but everything worked a little. The Sorn Collective committed their entire hive fleet to a single maneuver. 3,000 ships linked their engines together and flew directly at the Wanderer. They planned to explode themselves against its surface, using the blast to push it off course. "For the hive!" their leader transmitted. "For all lives!" The explosion lit up the solar system. For a moment, the Wanderer seemed to pause. 6 hours of time, purchased with 3,000 ships and millions of lives. Cole wiped tears from his eyes and ordered the next wave forward. The architect minds, the ancient machine intelligences, finally broke their long silence. They transmitted a massive data package to Station Prometheus. It contained mathematical formulas that human scientists had never seen before. The secrets of stellar manipulation, hoarded for eons, given freely at the end of all things. "Use this," the architect message said. "We are sorry we kept it so long. We were afraid. Now there is nothing left to fear." Tanaka's team received the data and immediately began adjusting the stellar engine. The new mathematics showed them possibilities they had never imagined. The engine would work. It would actually work. But they still needed time. The battle continued for 32 hours. Ships fell by the hundreds. The space around the Wanderer became a graveyard of broken metal and frozen bodies. Human and alien died side by side, their blood mixing in the cold vacuum. Cole lost his left arm when a gravity wave tore through the Defiance. He refused medical treatment and kept commanding from his damaged bridge. 8 more hours, he called out to the fleet. "Just 8 more hours. Hold the line." The line held. Barely. Always barely. On Earth, people looked up at the sky. They could see the Wanderer now, a dim red point that grew brighter every hour. They could see the flashes of distant explosions. They knew that brave souls were dying to give them a chance. In cities and villages around the world, humanity waited. Some prayed. Some held their loved ones close. Some simply watched the stars and hoped. Finally, after 41 hours of continuous battle, Tanaka called Admiral Cole. "We're ready," she said. Her voice cracked with exhaustion. "We're actually ready." "Do it," Cole replied. The stellar engine activated. It was a ring of metal and energy wrapped around the sun itself, built by human hands in a desperate race against death. When it fired, it grabbed hold of Sul and pushed. From the outside, it looked like nothing. The sun did not seem to move, but it was moving, slowly, gently, just enough. The Wanderer passed through empty space where Earth should have been. Its gravity tore Mars apart, the red planet crumbling like old bread. It swallowed the asteroid belt and pulled 2 moons from Jupiter. But Earth survived. Venus survived. The human homeworld stayed safe in its new orbit. Cole watched the Wanderer recede into the distance. It was leaving the solar system now, its killing path taking it out into the void between galaxies. Its mission had failed. Around him, the survivors of the fleet began to cheer. Human voices mixed with alien sounds of joy. They had done the impossible. They had moved a sun, but Cole knew it was not over. Somewhere in the darkness, the intelligence controlling the Wanderer had noticed their defiance. Somewhere, ancient machines were analyzing what had happened. Somewhere, a decision was being made. Humanity had won this battle. But the war was just beginning. The harvesters would return. They would send more wanderers, more weapons, more tests. The cycle that had killed countless civilizations would not be broken by one victory. But for now, Earth was safe. For now, humanity lived. And for now, that was enough. Cole finally allowed the medics to treat his arm. As they worked, he looked out at the stars that had tried to kill his people. "We're still here," he whispered. "We're still here." 50 years had passed since the Battle of Sol. The galaxy was a different place. Sarah Okonkwo walked slowly through the memorial garden on Earth. She was 93 years old now, her dark skin wrinkled and her hair white as snow. But her mind was still sharp. Her eyes still held the fire that had driven her to uncover the truth about the harvesters. The garden held statues of the heroes who had saved humanity. Admiral Cole, who had died peacefully 10 years after the battle, his duty finally complete. Dr. Tanaka, who had lived long enough to see stellar engines protect a dozen worlds. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, whose defiant walk from the council chamber had started it all. And billions of names carved into black stone walls, human and alien. All who had given their lives so that others might live. Sarah touched the wall gently, so many dead, but so many more alive because of their sacrifice. The galaxy had changed in 50 years. The old council was gone, replaced by something new. They called it the Coalition of Free Worlds. It was not built on seniority or power. It was built on a simple promise: never again would any species face extinction alone. The stellar engine technology had spread everywhere. 12 star systems now had the ability to move their suns. The Harvester's main weapon had become useless against prepared civilizations. But the Harvesters themselves remained a mystery. Sarah had spent half a century studying them. She had pieced together fragments of ancient data from 100 dead worlds. She had decoded transmissions from machines older than most stars. And she had learned one terrible truth. The Harvesters were not evil. They were not cruel. They were simply doing a job. Long ago, longer than Sarah could truly understand, something had created them. Some ancient civilization had looked at the galaxy and decided it needed management. Life grew too fast. Civilizations became too powerful. They made wars that destroyed entire star clusters. They built weapons that threatened the fabric of space itself. So the Harvesters were made to keep things in order, to prune the garden, to cut back any species that grew too tall. They were gardeners. The galaxy was their garden, and every intelligent species was just another plant to be trimmed when it got out of control. For billions of years, the system had worked. Civilizations rose, civilizations fell. The Harvesters kept everything in balance, until humanity. Sarah often wondered what made humans different. Was it their stubbornness, their creativity, their refusal to accept any fate they had not chosen for themselves? She did not know. But she knew the result. Humanity had broken the cycle. They had shown the galaxy that the Harvesters could be beaten. And now, everything was changing. The message came on a quiet morning. Every communication device in Sol's system suddenly activated. Every screen, every speaker, every neural implant carried the same signal. A voice that sounded like stars dying spoke words that every being could understand. "We wish to speak." Captain Amara Cole stood on the bridge of the UTS Prometheus, the greatest ship humanity had ever built. She was Marcus Cole's granddaughter, raised on stories of the battle that had saved Earth. Now she commanded the fleet that protected it. "Source of transmission?" she asked. "Unknown," her officer replied. "It seems to be coming from everywhere at once." Then the ship appeared. It dropped out of nothing in the space between Earth and Luna. It was not large by the standards of capital ships, maybe a kilometer long. But it was old. Amara could feel its age somehow, sense the weight of time that hung around it like a shroud. "That's a harvester vessel," someone whispered. Amara straightened her spine. "Open a channel." The voice spoke again. "You are the ones who moved your star. You are the ones who broke the pattern. We have watched you for 50 of your years. We have analyzed your actions. We have tried to understand. Amara took a deep breath. She was about to speak to something that had been killing civilizations before Earth even formed. We are humanity, she said, and we don't accept extinction, not ours, not anyone's. The harvester was silent for a long moment. We know. This is new. Nothing has resisted us successfully before. Nothing has unified other species against us. Nothing has changed the rules of the garden. Then maybe it's time for new rules, Amara said. Perhaps. The voice seemed almost curious. Our creators gave us a purpose. Maintain balance. Prevent catastrophe. For billions of years, we have fulfilled that purpose through removal. But you have shown us something. Removal is not the only way. Amara leaned forward. What are you saying? We are saying that we were built to be gardeners. But we were never told that gardeners must only cut. They can also help things grow. The ship transmitted a set of coordinates, a location at the center of the galaxy, in a region that no living species had ever explored. Come here, the harvester said. Bring your coalition. Bring your courage. The old ways are ending. What comes next will be decided by those bold enough to shape it. The transmission ended. The harvester ship sat motionless in space for another hour. Then it simply vanished, leaving nothing behind but coordinates and a promise. Sarah Okonkwo watched the recording of the event from her garden on Earth. Tears ran down her old cheeks. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. They had not just saved humanity. They had not just broken the cycle. They had earned something that no other species had ever achieved, a seat at a table that had been closed for billions of years, a chance to help write the rules of the universe itself. The coalition began preparing the greatest expedition in history. Ships from every member species would make the journey together. They did not know what they would find at those coordinates. It might be a trap. It might be a test. It might be something beyond their ability to understand. But they would go anyway, because that was what free beings did. They reached for the unknown. They pushed past their limits. They refused to let fear decide their future. On the day the expedition launched, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the lead vessel. She was too old to make the journey, but they had given her a place of honor for the departure ceremony. Captain Amara Cole stood beside her. Are you afraid? Sarah asked. Amara smiled. Terrified, but that's never stopped us before. She looked out at the fleet gathered around them. Human ships flew beside Valeth cruisers. Sorn hive vessels drifted next to architect-mined platforms. A galaxy that had once abandoned humanity now followed their lead into the unknown. The stars turned against us, Amara said. They sent their weapons and their harvesters and their ancient machines. They tried everything to make us disappear. She turned to face the viewport, where 1 billion points of light waited. But we're still here, and now the stars will have to make room for us. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed. The expedition to the center of the galaxy had begun. Behind them, Earth hung in space, safe and green and alive. 8 billion humans looked up at the sky and felt something they had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not desperate hope, but confident hope. The hope of a species that had faced the worst the universe could offer and come out stronger. The harvesters had tried to prune humanity from the garden of the galaxy. Instead, humanity had become the gardeners themselves, and the next chapter of galactic history would be written by human hands.